Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of Mocktail Minutes. This is Bailey.
And this is Brianna.
This week I am drinking the lemon lime Poppi. Easy, tasty, and I have a lot of them right now, so nothing crazy.
I'm just doing the electrolyte powder plus with like potassium forward one and
Mhm.
some creatine that I did not mix very well. So I just like drank a whole chunk of creatine and the electrolyte powder, but it's fine. If you mix it, it's very good.
Do you ever have people get like digestive issues when they start creatine?
I only notice it if they like aren't consistent with it. Like if they go on and off of it a lot, I feel like
Mhm.
they notice a lot more bloating, stuff like that. But
Yeah.
I feel like when people are consistent, they don't really notice anything. And I think some people are more sensitive than others because then I have others who don't ever notice any difference.
hmm
Yeah. What about you?
Um, I mean, I really don't. I have someone who thinks it's causing like diarrhea type things.
Oh,
I don't think that's actually doing it. So I was just curious.
no, it's probably whatever else she's drinking it with or doing, because I don't, it shouldn't cause
And I'm
it.
pretty sure it was before they even started the
Oh,
creatine. So I'm like, I don't think that's the
yeah.
issue.
No, I've never heard of it like causing diarrhea.
Yeah. No,
You
I was just curious.
know,
We are talking about fat today. I feel
yeah.
like fat is, I mean, kind of like carbs, but I think it's misunderstood because we've gone through decades of it being just like demonized of fat free is the best way where it's really not. And
Mm-mm.
so we're gonna set the record straight about what types of fats we should be including, why they matter, and how to choose more whole food fat sources.
Yeah. I think it was like a really common thought that like fat makes you fat. So like if I eat fat, I'm going to gain fat or it's going to be stored as fat. And so we're like terrified of it. And it probably really started happening in the 90s and 2000s when everyone started going like low fat craze. I think nowadays with like keto and carnivore, people are like, we should only be eating fat. And obviously with everything, there's a middle ground, but fat is really important. So it's an energy source. So that's where when people are doing keto and stuff like that, when we talk about ketosis, it could be used as an energy source. It helps you absorb nutrients like your fat soluble vitamins, like vitamin D that we talked about last week, but also A, E, and K. It's great for your brain health. So the brain is nearly 60% fat by weight. So your brain loves fat. It helps. It's a protective thing for your brain. It's good for hormone production and synthesis. So you cannot synthesize hormones correctly if you are under eating fat. So this is very important for women. And then it helps support cell structures and overall health. So fat does a lot in our body. And if you're under eating it, you're going to have a lot of issues.
And we've also been told all of our lives pretty much that eating fat is like bad for your heart and everything. Really, it
Mm-hmm.
kind of depends on the types of fat. So it's not like the end of the story. It's like bad fat equals bad. So when we're looking at the types of fats, you're going to have unsaturated fats. So these are like we have mono and polyunsaturated fats. This will be more heart health protective. It helps reduce inflammation and promotes better brain functioning. So some food sources that would be avocados, nuts, like your almonds are really great for your unsaturated fats. Seeds, olives, extra virgin olive oil is a great oil to always keep on hand, and then especially fatty fish. And then you have saturated fats. So this is one that is definitely demonized,
Oh, yeah.
where we've been told like no saturated fats, no saturated fats. And I would say like you don't need as many saturated fats as you do unsaturated. And
Mm-hmm.
the key here is you want to get whole food saturated food sources. So like animal fats, butter, full fat dairy, meat, and then like coconut oil. Those are all great sources of saturated fats. And so there's a lot of misconception around it, but there is more research coming out that's saying moderate saturated fat intake from whole foods isn't necessarily harmful to your heart like we once thought. So
Mm-hmm.
we want to get this saturated fat in because it's also going to play roles within the body too.
And especially like if you're thinking about a lot of those sources of saturated fat, what other nutrients they have in them, like the
Mhm.
vitamin A and the B and the iron and zinc and all those good things. So I think we definitely demonize like things like a good quality red meat. I think we demonize them a little much. Like when we're talking about excessive saturated fat intake, I'm more concerned about those overly processed foods. Like if you were to go eat like a Hostess or a Little Debbie that has saturated fat in it, I'm much more concerned about that saturated fat than I would be if you're like ordering a steak at dinner. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But you need unsaturated and you need saturated, just like you need the different sources of your unsaturated fat too. Like
Mm-hmm.
omega-3s, you need your omega-6, you need unsaturated, you need saturated. That isn't known. The one that you absolutely don't need is trans fat. So that's like the bad guy, the one that we started using in our food system, thinking like we beat the system type thing. Like we took, what is it, like an unsaturated fat, but we did something to make it more stable and act like a saturated fat. And we're like, we've cheated the system. It's good for your health, but it acts like a saturated. And then we found out, oh, this is way worse for like your heart and your cholesterol and cancer. Like, let's not do that. So much so that now it's not allowed to be in most of your food sources that you buy at the store. But something that I didn't know up until like a couple of years ago, even, is that it could still be in fast food. And you can look up like different fast food restaurants, kind of like their nutrition facts, and there's a good amount of them that have like their trans fat is actually decently high, like around
Yeah.
5 grams for one meal when you should be eating less than 1 gram max
Mm-hmm.
a day.
And
So
they use it because it's cheap. So
yeah, it's very cheap. It's very shelf stable. It lasts forever. And I don't know why they're still allowed to use them, but again, free market, it's up to the consumer to know what's good for them, what's not great for them. So if you didn't know, trans fat is in fast food, which is why it's just a good idea to not eat fast food all the time in general.
mhm. And with the saturated fats too, we kind of mentioned some benefits like fat overall. It's that dense source of energy. You're going to get that brain health and nervous system support. It's going to help produce hormones like testosterone, estrogen, cortisol, and then even cholesterol, which is often found alongside saturated fats, serves as building block for hormones. So I feel like cholesterol, we hear that as a bad word too. Cholesterol is not a bad word as well. It's also saturated fat is going to help maintain that like integrity of your cell membranes to help not be damaged. So we want healthy cell membranes to protect our cells. And then something else we don't often get told is some consumption of saturated fats actually helps increase your HDL good cholesterol. So that again, heart healthy, well, it's supporting your heart health there as well. So it can help improve your ratio of HDL and LDL cholesterol, which is a better indicator of cardiovascular health than just total cholesterol. And
Mhm.
then, I mean, it even plays a role in bone health because it helps aid in the absorption of calcium into your bones to help maintain that bone density and strength. And then when you combine this with fat soluble like vitamin D, these fats are especially beneficial for skeletal health. And
Mhm.
then Brianna mentioned omega 3s and omega 6s. So those are your polyunsaturated fats. And with these, basically, they just differ in their chemical structure and how they affect inflammation and overall health. Omega 3s, again, good for brain health, for like your cognitive function, memory, mood regulation, your heart health by they help like reduce your triglycerides, eye health, essential for vision. So DHA, which is a type of omega 3, makes up a significant portion of your retina. And then joint health, your then types of omega 3s, you have ALA, which is found in your plant sources. And then that's going to be also found like so your flax seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds, like your seeds. And then you have the EPA and DHA. So those are the most bioavailable forms, meaning your body is going to use it really well, type of omega 3 and critical for your brain, eye, and heart health. So you can
Mhm.
get that from fatty fish, fish oil, cod liver oil, algae. And this is honestly why I recommend most of my clients to get a high quality omega 3 because living in Missouri, we're just not getting a lot of high quality fatty
Fish.
fish.
Yeah. I actually had a call with people about this yesterday, and they were like wondering that because, they started really being mindful of like their fat intake, what kind of fat they were doing. And then they also started taking like a good omega-3, and they had like a bunch of better labs, and especially like their inflammation labs. And they were kind of like, can I overdo it with omega-3? Or like, should I, now that it's better, should I not be doing it? And my whole thing was like, you probably weren't getting what you needed from your diet very much. And so you can play around with it. Like, okay, stop taking the omega, just do the dietary changes you were doing and then test again and see where it's at. But odds are you're going to benefit from an omega-3 supplement. Like, exactly. People just aren't eating a ton of fatty fish. It's expensive. It's hard to make. A lot of people don't have access to it. You know,
Yes.
think about why the Mediterranean diet is like so raved about. It's like, well, yeah, they have a ton of seafood.
Amazing. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to eat that for like a week at least.
Right.
I mean, ideally more than a week, but I'm being realistic here.
But yeah, I think its role in inflammation is really critical. And I think people just kind of underestimate it. The other thing too, if you're thinking about, like we kind of talked about like your nervous system, but it helps to make up the myelin sheath. So the little protective insulation thing that covers your nerve, like neurons, like all those things running throughout your body, they need fat. So if your nervous system is like kind of stressed out, or you're having a lot of like MS, things like that. I mean, taking omega isn't just going to cure MS, but it's protective against things like that because your nervous system and your brain are so strongly dependent on it. And then the fact that you can just reduce inflammation, all of that together is like crazy important, which is, if you look at how typically people are eating, they pull a bunch of fat out of their diet. When you pull a bunch of fat out of your diet, you're probably adding sugar into it because, again, we've talked about if you don't have fat, you need to have sugar to kind of stabilize things, make things taste good. You pull a bunch of fat out, so now you don't have those protective benefits. And then you put a bunch of sugar in, which is going to exacerbate inflammation. So now you have less protection, more inflammation. It's like this storm. I mean, we don't need to be scared of that. I like that.
And then we get to the theory of like, why is everyone against us in the food world? Why are we making our food worse for us?
Right.
And it's actually funny. I was talking to someone as we're working on like decreasing their added sugars. I help them add up added sugars in like one meal. They were at like 40 grams. And you just don't recognize it until you start paying attention. And so we were talking about just decreasing it. She's like, well, my food's going to taste gross now. I'm like, just try it. And so she did. And she's like, oh, swapping out my grill, it actually wasn't even that bad. I'm like, yeah,
You're like, yeah,
it's
see,
not
we
that
can do
bad.
it.
It's just the idea in our head that we are obsessed with sugar that things are gonna taste bad without it. I'm like, it actually might not be that bad. And like I still enjoy my food. And so I think that's an important part of everything. Like it's
Yeah.
probably not as bad as you think. Like we just need to get back to these whole foods and life will be golden again.
It'll be fine. But it's like really when the people are trying to do like no sugar, no fat. I'm like, well,
Yes.
yeah, this is why you hate what you're eating.
Yeah,
None of
it's way too strict.
it's so
Yes.
strict. None of it really tastes good. You're probably feeling deprived all the time. But yeah, when you start doing more of those like whole food sources of things, you're very satiated. You feel full. You feel good. And I think we have this weird like concept of, oh, whole food doesn't taste good. Like it doesn't, like that doesn't taste good, which I'm like, well, then you must not have been exposed to a lot of it or know how to cook it because whole foods taste great.
And I think it's hard too because in the dieting world, when you're on these diets, they're pulling you away from the fat. They're pulling you away from the flavor. Fat gives
Yeah.
it nice flavor. And I know like some people who have done HCG and it's like plain chicken, 5 blueberries, and steamed broccoli. Like, yeah, that sounds disgusting. Like, why can't you use garlic on your chicken or salt and pepper? It's so weird. And that's where we get this idea that it's good for you. It can't taste good for you type of idea.
Exactly. But fat tastes delicious. There's a reason why everybody loves Mexican food.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
it's the
good.
spices and stuff, but it's also the fat. Delicious.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
and you're saying that and you don't even need the cheese on it.
Still so good. We
Um,
love the lard.
I love it. It's so good. Um,
Yes. Well, I guess omega sixes.
oh yeah, no, go
Let's
ahead.
go over those. Omega sixes, so that's your LA, linoleic acid, and arachidonic. Is that how you say it? Arachidonic acid? LA and AA. We'll go by that. So LA is your primary omega-6 fatty acid found in your diet. Your body will convert LA into AA, which can produce pro-inflammatory molecules, aka inflammation. So AA is found naturally in meat and eggs. While inflammatory in excess, it is also supporting brain function, immune response, and muscle growth. So this is why when I am working with people and we're like, working to decrease vegetable oils, like your soybean, canola, safflower, sunflower oils. I'm not saying you have to completely avoid them.
Yeah.
I'm saying reduce them where you can because you're probably getting them in other spots, especially if you're going out to eat, you're going to get them. And I mean, Triscuits, I think are a great example. I don't know your opinion on this, but my opinion, I I buy Triscuits because they only have three ingredients in it.
Hmm.
One ingredient being canola oil, but I'm okay with it because I don't know, like less ingredients overall. It's not as expensive as other higher quality crackers without the canola oil. They're
Hmm.
easily accessible and I really like them. So that's a spot where I'm going to get it. And I
Yeah.
think it's just thinking through things like that helps you decide what foods you can swap out. But like spaghetti sauce, I'm not getting the one with canola oil. I'm getting the one made with olive oil.
Right.
Just different things like that can add up to help decrease omega 6s. Because, like I said, you need them, just not in the high amount that we're typically getting them in. Because it's also in processed foods, your chips, your baked goods, fast food, like you mentioned. And there is actually a little bit in your nuts and seeds too. So you are
Hmm.
getting them. We just want to avoid them more, I would say, and the more of the processed foods. Just seeing where you can make swaps there.
Yeah, because you still need them. These are like essential, they're essential to your diet. You have to have them, you need them. So the issue is when you're trying to control inflammation, it's like that ratio. It really should be like a 1-to-1 omega-3 or omega-6 to omega-3 ratio where we are typically eating about like 15-to-1. And so that's where we're having a hard time controlling inflammation. And for people who are dining out a lot, relying heavily on processed foods, that might even be closer to like 32-to-1. Like it's exponentially higher. So it's not that we want to pull it all the way out. We need it. But yeah, where can you make the swaps? And I agree. There's a couple of products where I'm like, this is a product I really enjoy. This is what I want. It like kind of checks all the boxes. And I know I'm not cooking with a bunch of vegetable oil. I'm not doing all that, all the oils that I cook with are more like olive oil, avocado oil. So I'm fine with that. It's not like I'm just relying on, those more pro-inflammatory oils that I'm consuming all the time. So my ratio is much better. And I think that's how you need to look at it, because if you just try to cut out all of them, you're going to find that's very difficult.
And then you're going to be so stressed out about eating. Now we're going to have more gut issues. We're going to have more cortisol. We have a
Yeah.
whole set of
Then we're
issues.
having inflammation in other ways because we're stressed about it. So make the good stuff. Like there's a couple, I can't think about it off the top of my head, but there's like a really good protein bar that I'm like, it has very good fiber. It has such good protein. The ingredients are pretty good. And everyone's always like, yeah, but it has soybean oil. I'm like, okay, true. But unless you're eating like multiple of them every single day, plus doing a whole bunch of other stuff, like you can kind of make swaps where you will. If you only have a couple of products or like one that you really like that has it, I just really wouldn't stress about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you mentioned kind of like cooking/baking. So your best fats for cooking, extra virgin olive oil is going to be for like your low to medium.
Mhm.
That's so like saute or roasting around 375. I honestly, I mean, I roast my vegetables a little higher than and I still use olive oil. I mean, it can kind of cut out the benefits a little bit, but sometimes we're out of avocado oil and that's just life.
Yeah.
So olive oil, mainly use it for sauteing.
Hmm.
Avocado oil, that's more for that high heat cooking, frying, roasting, grilling type of thing. Because it has a higher smoke point, and it's also going to be rich in those monounsaturated fats. And it's not going to make your food taste like avocados. It's pretty neutral. It's a mild taste.
Yeah. We're like olive oil, you can taste it. It's like meant to be tasted.
Yes.
Avocado
Yep.
oil.
And then ghee, I've actually found a spray ghee on Thrive Market, and it's really good. It
Ooh.
it just takes your eggs to the next level. But it's one that you can use for medium to high heat cooking. So saute, roast, or pan frying. It has a, again, higher smoke point, but it's a higher smoke point than like regular butter because the milk solids are removed. But then it's
Mhm.
also still rich in vitamin A, D, and K. So it gives it like a buttery taste. I love it because with the dairy allergy, I can actually tolerate ghee and I still get like a real butter taste, not like crappy margarine taste.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say that is such a good swap, like, especially if you do have a milk allergy. I think ghee is way better than like I can't believe it's not butter or other types of
Yes.
margarine.
Coconut oil is another one I use a lot. That is a good one for baking. So, and it's also good at like a medium heat, so like 350 due to its saturated fat content. So
Mhm.
it's great for baking, especially if you're like dairy free. It does give it a slight coconut taste, I will say that, but it goes nicely, I think, with the baked goods. It's not like we've talked about this before. It's not like the pina coladas now in your brownies type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like it for baking because it does add a little bit of nutty, it's a little sweet. I think it goes nicely, but
Mhm.
I don't mind it.
Yes. And then, well, butter. So you can also use butter. That's more low heat cooking, baking, adding flavor at the end because it has that low smoke point. So it's like 300. So if you've ever tried to like saute some stuff, I've noticed if you saute it a little too long, you got smoke everywhere. But
Yeah.
that's just because butter does better at low heat. And that's why you really shouldn't, you're not like going to roast your vegetables in butter, really.
Mhm.
But butter, real butter is great to use. And then we mentioned lard. So lard is good for high heat cooking and they're pretty heat stable and it gives it a really rich flavor. So a lot of Mexican restaurants do use lard. It's a very savory.
Yeah. And it has like like you said, it's good for high heat cooking. So like,
Mhm.
frying, which I don't love frying things, but I mean, that's what they're doing at restaurants. So that's why it tastes so good. But I'd rather them fry it in lard than, something else.
Canola oil.
Yeah. Personally, but
It's so expensive though.
it is
Like
very,
have you we've like fried some stuff at home and it literally uses a whole bottle of canola oil and I'm like, I am not paying $15 to fry this up and then you like throw out half the oil anyways. I'm like,
yeah.
I think we've done that once this year. That one time I'm gonna survive, so it's okay.
Well, and that's kind of like where, balance, right? Like, fine, I'm not going to do it at home, but I'm going to go to like a nice quality restaurant. I'm going to let them do it because you're right. It is expensive. And then you use it
It's kind
once.
of, yeah.
Oh, well.
I'd be so sad to like use that much avocado oil and throw it out. I'd probably throw up just seeing that money pour out.
I know, especially when it's like a good quality avocado oil. It's like,
Yes.
no.
Canola oil, I don't care.
Let's address this because I know we're going to get asked this question like full fat versus low fat for things.
Yes.
I feel like the answer for a lot is it depends, right? Like, when are you using it? I think we have gotten into, and maybe I think we're coming out of this, but I think we've gotten into the habit of like low fat, no fat, everything. And I don't agree with that. But I also think like there's a time and a place for like some lower fat options. So I always tell
We,
people, like, look at how you're using it in a meal,
yeah.
like if you're going to do a bunch of like let's take a yogurt bowl, for example. I
Yes.
like to use Greek yogurt because it's higher in protein, lower in fat, because I'm going to add nut butter and I'm going to add seeds and other nuts. And I can easily get 20 to 30 grams of fat in a yogurt bowl without having any fat from the yogurt. Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense? So, same with like if you're dining out, because I get the question about like, oh, well, chicken versus beef. Like if you're getting a chicken bowl at Chipotle, which is lower in fat, well, maybe you can add some cheese or avocado or something, like you need to add some fat to it. But if you're doing kind of a higher fat, you don't need to add the cheese and the sour cream and the avocado and the queso because now
Mm-hmm.
we have a ton of fat, so kind of like, when am I
It
using
just
it?
depends.
Yeah, what does my meal look like? I think that's
Yes,
hard.
I think that's a great point. And I would say overall with like dairy, like you said, just think about how you're going to use it. If you like to add nuts and chia seeds and everything, you're getting fat from other sources.
Mhm.
Honestly, I find it easier for most of my clients just to do like a low fat or a 1% dairy product so that way they can add the other things and not stress out about it because it's so easy to overdo it on fat. So I'm like, just do that. Then you can add your other toppings and it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
So that can help. But other things like Cheez-Its, for example, or anything like that, I just think go with if it's something that had a fat in it originally and now it's no fat or low fat, they had to process it more to do that and they're probably adding something else in.
Yep.
So just go with the OG. And I've even looked at this on salad dressings. I compared two, and both of the ones, it was the lower fat one had more added sugars in it. It's like,
Mhm.
just go with the other one. It's gonna be fine. That's just your fat
Yeah.
source for the meal, and that's okay.
Well, and also look at your serving sizes because sometimes
Yes,
I'll look at the back of like salad dressing and it's like the full fat one will have like 5 grams of fat
that's a
in
good
a
point.
serving size. And like there's one maybe in the low fat, but I'm like, how much salad dressing are we using? Are we using 20 or 30 grams of fat of salad dressing? Like, probably not. And you do need some fat when you're eating those vegetables, right? So it's like, when are you using it? Yeah, that's my go-to as well. Like if it had fat in it originally, keep it because it's going to be less processed. It's more in its natural form. And odds are it's okay. Like I think about that too. Like when people are like looking at heavy cream and they're like, oh, it's so like fattening. And I'm like, well, it does have a decent amount of fat in it, but how much are you using? Like most people are using like a tablespoon in their coffee. Okay, that's like 5 grams of fat. Yeah, if you like to add like a lot and you like very light coffee, okay, we're not going to use heavy cream to make it light because yeah, that is a lot. Okay, that can add up. But kind of just thinking of something as like, oh, that must be very fat. The cream cheese is another example. I'm like, it depends on how much you're using. So I think knowing how much, like, don't be scared because it could be like a high fat product. Actually, kind of sit there and think, like, what is an actual serving size? And am I using less than that? More of that? Let me kind of judge that too. Cause I think we're just like terrified of fat because we need a decent amount of fat for the day. But like you said, it is easy to overdo it. That's where like building this awareness is very helpful. Like, how much am I eating?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say overall, what we want you to take away from this episode, get a variety of whole food fat sources. That
Yes.
is going to be your best bet. Nuts, seeds, fish, if you can get it, olive oil, avocados. I love avocados. Oh, I'm introducing Gannon to avocados this week, so I
I
hope
love
he loves
avocado.
it.
I love avocados and I actually recommend them so much that I'm so shocked when people are like, oh, I don't like avocados. I'm like,
Yeah,
why?
I'm like, what do you mean you
What do
don't
you
like avocados?
mean? Yes, you do.
Yes.
Yes, you
Throw
do.
them, throw them in your smoothie. You can't even taste it, but you're getting all the great benefits. Fiber
Yeah.
plus healthy fats, like amazing.
That's my number one like tip for using it if you don't like the taste. And because it's cheap too. Frozen little
Yes.
cube avocado, so
And you
cheap.
can make them yourself.
Yeah, I know. Avocado, but it's a great source. So yeah, like you were saying, the nuts, seeds of any sort, nuts and seeds of any sort, any fatty fish, mostly your cold water, but fatty fish, avocados, olives, and then the saturated fat you get from like whole fat dairy, beef, stuff like that. Eggs are another one. The egg yolk as well. Don't be scared to eat the egg yolk.
Eat the yolk.
Eat the yolk. The cholesterol in your egg yolk is not making your blood cholesterol increase.
Correct. We need an episode on cholesterol.
Yes, we do.
Actually, I think I have someone that might be a good guest speaker for that.
Ooh, let's do it. Cause I think that's a myth I'm constantly debunking. Everyone's
Oh
like,
yeah,
well,
all the time.
cholesterol. And I'm like, actually, the yolk can help lower your cholesterol.
Yes.
But like I said, I think people are always trying to do their best. I really do. And I think sometimes the things that we're trying to do for our health actually hurt our health. So the more that you know, the better you can do. Cause I do think everyone has good intentions, but
All right, everyone. We hope this episode was helpful. We will be back next week with a brand new episode. And be sure to follow us on our new page for Mocktail Minutes. The at name is just at Mocktail Minutes. So give us a follow. We're going to move more of the podcast stuff over there. We'll obviously still be talking on our personal pages, but that's going to be the dedicated
platform.
profile platform, whatever you want to call it. All the podcast
Landing
names will
page.
be on there. And we have some big plans for 2025, so stay tuned. All right.
I'm excited.
Bye, everyone.